So those are the oyster lanterns are hanging underneath those buoys, and that's an oyster farm. And there are a variety of farms across the bay. But anytime you see those rows of blue buoys, you're looking at an oyster farm. And oysters are farmed in those baskets, but mussels are not. Mussels are in a bed and steamers are in beds.
Sure. Have you ever watched them do anything? You ever check these or how they go about doing that?
It's pretty cool. It's surprisingly straightforward, and they'll bring up a chain of lanterns. They stack up kind of like cookies. And they hose them off, and they make sure that the oysters aren't growing into each other. They want them to be separated so that they can feed. And they'll check, make sure that they're, that the starfish hasn't gotten in there and eaten them all, and do a little maintenance. And then when they're getting ready to harvest, they'll bring some of those lanterns out onto the beach and let the edges get polished off a little bit, because the shells can get really sharp. And so they want them, kind of getting knocked around a little bit just to get some of the rough edges off. And it's a whole process. Raising oysters is not like sticking something in the ground or in the water and letting it go. There's a tremendous amount of work, and that oyster is in and out of the water. It's getting handled. It's getting manipulated to create the oyster that you have sitting on your plate when you go to the dinner table.
Wow. I guess I misunderstood that whole thing. I thought it was more like an oyster trap.
Yeah.
That it's trapping oysters,
yeah.
But they're really raising them.
They're raising them. They're planted. It's farming. It is intensive aquaculture. And they start with little spat that are just incredibly tiny.
Aww.
And then they grow them bigger, bigger, bigger. And then one of the things they're doing when they're sorting their lanterns is that they're sizing them. They're looking at the depth of the cup, how deep that piece is, and they'll grade the oysters all the way up, from uglies on the one end, all the way up to premiers or the A+ oysters on the other end.